Wild Health is about optimizing you. We use genomics, blood work, biometrics, microbiome assessment, many other tests, and a conversation with you to come up with a full health optimization plan. What's the perfect diet, exercise, and supplement plan for you and only you? The Wild Health podcast is about optimizing all of us. Here we cover the cutting-edge science that gives you the base to be able to apply the personalized plan we give you as a patient. To sign up as a patient, go to wildhealth.com. Or if you're a physician or health coach and you want to learn how to do this for your patients, we're happy to help as well. wildhealth.com for all the information on becoming a patient or working with us. Good morning, Thursday, August 13th. Sorry again about the delay in updates. And as I'm sure your life is crazy and hectic, so has ours been. So we apologize for the delay, but we wanted to give you a quick COVID update today, and we have several other really what we think are interesting podcasts coming up over the next few days. So sorry we've been absent, but globally, just to kind of start big picture, the Financial Times, data from the Financial Times shows that the death toll continues to rise globally. So the 7-day rolling average, which is probably the best measure to look at for daily deaths, is up to about 5,900 patients per day. That's about 800 more than the previous week. So if you look at the big picture around the world, the deaths are going up. We're not going in the right direction. That same upward trajectory does apply to the United States, getting a little closer to home, where our 7-day rolling average has increased to over 1,000 deaths per day. In fact, the United States share of the global death toll has again risen to 17%, where Latin America's share has dropped slightly to 44% of global deaths. Looking more granular in the United States, outbreaks continue to smolder across the country. Florida and Georgia reported their highest single-day coronavirus death tolls on Tuesday, as more than 1,300 deaths reported nationwide. Each of those states also had their highest total as well. An analysis from the New York Times shows that a large share of the coronavirus outbreaks that occurred in communities across the country originated in restaurants and bars. Obviously, places where you have congregate living facilities like nursing homes and prisons are problems, but eateries have consistently been the site of widespread outbreaks in places like Nashville, Las Vegas, Atlanta, and Milwaukee, forcing a lot of eateries to temporarily close because of cases among the employees there. So it's probably one of the places to avoid if you are out and about and need to go out and about for some reason. Russia, I'm sure you saw this news, Mike, announced that they had developed a safe and effective coronavirus vaccine that they're going to give to millions of people. Dr. Fauci
Awesome.
Definitely had some doubts about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I don't know if it's appropriate for you to give your thoughts in your Russian accent or not. Maybe not, but what are your thoughts in your regular American accent?
I don't know. Do we publish this to Russia? If so, I decline any comment.
Nobody in Russia listens.
I mean, I don't know how Russia would be so far ahead of the rest of the world on this. I mean, to produce a safe and effective vaccine is just not feasibly possible in the time frame that we've had since the DNA evaluation and the RNA evaluation rather, and the full scientific evaluation of SARS-CoV-2. So I just don't see how it's possible.
Yeah, and when I heard this,
the Russians are pretty good at stuff.
Yeah, I mean they've got some great scientists. I mean, when I heard this, my thought was, one, honestly, this is probably good for the rest of the world because we're going to find out if their vaccine is safe or not because they're going to give it to millions of people. But number two, this is not a good time to be a Russian citizen probably if you have this kind of thrust upon you, because it doesn't seem like they could have a really safe and effective vaccine by now. I hope they do. And we'll probably find out sooner rather than later, but at the expense of their population, because they're gonna give it.
So I mean, to be real about this, I mean, if you look at some of the greatest science that has come out of the world in history, it's come out of places where human rights have been violated in the name of science. So I mean, to be frank, if somebody is going to come up with a viable vaccine in a short period of time, a lack of concern for human rights would make it feasible to do so in a faster time frame.
And we are not condoning lack of human rights for sure. I mean, this is scary, and it is Yeah, no, it makes me just really worried for the people who are going to get this vaccine right now. And if you look at even our trials, like there are several vaccines that look very promising, and we could rush and just start giving it to people, and we would have an answer more quickly. But that's just not the way to do this. So hopefully it does work, but I'm worried about the people who get this vaccine right now. I think they're not going through probably the normal processes with this. Hopefully it'll work though. Remdesivir, this is an interesting story, Mike. Remdesivir, since it's the only drug that has been FDA approved, it's not the only. It was the first one that was shown to really help speed recovery in COVID patients and was FDA approved pretty early. It's been in short supply, but I thought it was really cool to see that Pfizer announced that it entered into an agreement with Gilead, which is the maker of Remdesivir, to manufacture the drug in its facilities in Kansas. Because you don't see agreements between rival drug companies like this. But so I thought this was kind of a really nice story of cooperation among drug and pharmaceutical companies that you just don't see, but it's the right thing to do for the world, and they're doing it. So it was really cool. Gilead says it hopes to produce more than 2 million courses of the treatment by the end of the year and several million doses in 2021.
The big news, Matt, that I wanted to talk about today is basically all about vaccines. So I've got 3 to talk about specifically. The first one is from Pfizer, along with a German biotech company that's called BioNTech. And they announced that they'd agreed to basically a $2 billion contract with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to distribute 600 million doses of a potential coronavirus vaccine. That is, of course, assuming that the vaccine proves to be effective and safe in clinical trials. So basically, under the contract, companies are going to supply the federal government with 100 million doses initially. So that's hopefully by the end of this year is what we're hoping for. But realistically, it might be first quarter next year. And then up to 500 million additional doses down the road once they can ramp up distribution and manufacturing. Interestingly, they announced that the vaccine is going to be free to all Americans, which I honestly has been a question in the back of my mind. Are we going to expect Americans to pay for this out of pocket? Are we going to expect insurance companies to cover it? How are we going to manage the financial ramifications of a vaccine? Another vaccine coming out of the University of Oxford is currently undergoing clinical trials. The researchers launched a trial of 1,100 people, and it's a phase 3 trial and currently underway in Brazil, South Africa, the UK, and the United States. Phase 3 trial, Matt, is the final stage trial. So this is the one where we're actually giving the vaccine to people and seeing how it functions, whether it's actually inferring some degree of protection from the virus. So this is good. We're getting to a point now where we're seeing some later data where we're actually assessing the validity of some of these vaccines. Probably the biggest news in vaccine development right now is coming out of a small company in Maryland, actually, called Novavax. So this is a company that's never brought a vaccine to the market before, but they released some pretty exciting news that and a lot of people think puts them sort of at the lead to developing a successful vaccine. They developed a spike protein-based vaccine that they made in farm moths. So that's the little things that flap around in a farm, in case you can understand
you remember,
what I'm saying.
6 months ago when I told you I thought probably farm moths was going to be the solution.
I do. Yeah. And it makes sense, So protein-based vaccines are really well studied. They are some of the oldest school version of vaccines, much more well studied and experienced with these than we are, say, like the RNA typed vaccines. So protein-based vaccines, that's what we use with hepatitis B. That's what we use with shingles vaccines. I mean, these are vaccines that we've been giving people for a very long time and been very successful with it. They use something interesting with this protein-based vaccine. It's something called an adjuvant, which is basically just a chemical that they put in there with the vaccine that activates your immune system to create a larger response to the antigen or the protein, the thing that we're trying to create the immune system to respond against. So in this case, they've got a chemical in there with these like little sort of fake spike proteins that they're using to sort of activate the T cells. So that's the part of the immune system that helps sort of design design the attack against the virus. And that's not something that would typically get activated with just a standard protein-based vaccine. So this is something that's been done in the past. They're using something called the matrix M protein, which sounds very fancy. But basically all it's doing is it's activating these T cells and helping increase the immune response. This is important, Matt, because there's been actually some decent data that's several months old now showing that T cell response is very important for fighting off SARS. And it's probably a strong T cell response that you have from a different coronavirus is the reason that some people can fight off the virus without any symptoms. And also why some people don't actually develop antibodies, because they're just fighting it off with that T cell response that they already have, rather than actually using their B cells to make antibodies towards the virus. So this particular vaccine has been shown to produce antibody response in monkeys, protecting them from SARS-CoV-2. This was a phase 2 trial that was just released last week. That also shows that 131 humans had an effective antibody response after just 2 doses of the vaccine. There were no adverse events. This is 28 days, so obviously we don't have long-term data on this yet. But the primary side effect was only soreness at the site of injection, which I think most people would take over getting coronavirus at this point. So at this point, we don't have study participants exposed to the virus to see that they could fight it off, but they did extract the serum from the study participants, so those 131 people that got the vaccine, and they placed it into cell culture where the virus was and was able to neutralize the virus. So if the phase 3 trial is successful, we're basically looking at 50 million doses from this company by early 2021. And as you know, Matt, 50 million doses will easily cover all of Americans.
Probably not. So, however, I think you said an important thing when you said people would probably take the soreness over getting a coronavirus, because probably is the operative word. There may only be about 50 million Americans willing to take this, so maybe it will cover all of America. I texted you an article I saw the other day, and I wish I don't have it in front of me right now, but it was talking to people, asking them, are you willing to take a vaccine if it is proven safe and effective? And it's interesting, they broke it up by political affiliation. And I don't remember all the exact numbers, but I do remember that over half of Republicans in the survey said they would not take a vaccine. And it was a substantial number of people who wouldn't in other groups as well. And they broke it up by many different categories. But I think even when we get a vaccine, we've said this before, but it'll be interesting to see how many people are willing to take it or not. There's just been so much back and forth about this. And especially, and that's one of the issues I think too with the Russian vaccine. Like if it is proven to not be safe, then it's that much less likely that people will use the one that is proven to be safe. Once you've got that in the news that, hey, this was rushed and it hurt these people in this way. So we're a long ways to go here with getting a vaccine. And then once we get it, making sure it is safe.
There's going to be a lot of convincing.
Yeah, exactly. And before you hang up, Mike, I just looked at my phone, and we weren't planning on talking about this, but I just got the 5th text today from someone saying, hey, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on school starting back. And so instead of having this conversation 10 times a day like I am, let's talk about it for a few minutes, just mainly selfishly so I can refer people to this podcast instead of hashing it out. But I can go first, or you can go first, but what do you think about schools opening? The positives, the negatives, the upside, the downside? You want me to start, or you want to start?
I mean, I think I can start. I've been thinking about this a good bit recently. We are not opening back up in Oregon, and that's been a big topic of discussion, obviously, amongst all the parents that I know. And the thing that frustrates me the most is that we are opening back up in so many other areas of society. You can go sit down inside in a restaurant. You can go to a bar until 10 o'clock at night. You can get together in fairly large groups and be inside, wearing masks, obviously. And I just don't understand where the disconnect is with children and with the rest of society. It's almost like we've basically made the decision that the economy is not worth injuring based on the risk of coronavirus, but our children's education and their livelihood is worth it. And that to me is a disconnect. So that has been the biggest issue that I have with it. In terms of, is there risk associated with going back to school? Sure, yeah. There's risk at any point of getting an infection when you go out right now. It's a matter of determining what that risk is and whether it is, and how it relates to the other risks opposed to society by staying locked down completely. And I just feel like we have made lots of rash decisions about whether children should be going back or whether we should be opening up other parts of society. And there hasn't been a very large community conversation about those decisions.
Yeah, and this would be a good discussion since you and I haven't had it, and there may be some places we actually disagree. So it'd be interesting to have this because from my perspective, it's hard to untangle your own personal wishes and your own personal incentives. When I step back and try to do it, I try to look at should schools be open, but look from multiple different perspectives. So if I just think about kids and my kids, I think the risk to kids is not zero, but it's pretty low. Like I think the risk of them being out of school is probably worse than them being in school for individual children. I have had 3 different parents who are physicians tell me that their kids have expressed suicidal thoughts. These are good families, good homes. So the damage to kids is real. It's actually out there for them not going back to school. So I want my kids in school. However, if I look at this from not a perspective of a parent and kids, the number one way to throw gasoline on a raging pandemic, fire of a pandemic, is to have tons of kids get together and open schools. So if we open schools back up and kids go back to school, there will be more deaths from it. If we don't, there will be negative consequences to the kids. Like my mother is a teacher, she just retired, but if she came to me and she was going back this year and she said, should I go back? I would say, absolutely not. Are you insane? Like kids are little vectors for virus always. Like older teachers at risk. I had a patient who has chronic disease and is a teacher and asked me the other day, can you write me a note to say I can't go back? And they are at much higher risk. So it depends on whose perspective you look at this from. So I can see the argument, and that's why I feel like it's really it's going to come down to a lot of personal decisions, which is going to be difficult when we have any systemic response. Just to give you even more granular example, in my household, I have 4 kids. We are sending 2 of them back, and 2 of them we are not, because when I look at the risk and rewards, my 10 and 8-year-old, the risk of them catching coronavirus, in my estimation, is less of a risk than them being socially isolated and missing out on their education right now. But I have a 4 and 2-year-old. And for them, the benefit of them going to school when they can stay at home and play with each other and still have their grandparents and others is a lower risk at home than going to school and be damaged by constantly told to put their mask on and not touch anybody, and the risk of them bringing back the virus to a vulnerable family member. So even within my family, the decision is split 50-50 as to whether the kids should go back or not. So I think when anybody asks me the question, should kids go back to school, it just depends who are you, from whose perspective. And that's why this is such a difficult decision. Like this is.
I wish we disagreed more on this because it'd be more interesting.
Well, I guess to make up a disagreement from one thing I heard you say, you did make the point that we're doing a bad job of opening bars and stuff, so we could do a bad job in opening schools. I don't know if 2 bads.
No. You misunderstand my point. My point was that we're making rash decisions about other areas of society that we're going to open up, yet we're focusing hyper intensely about schools. And it's just like the talk of the nation. Everybody's talking about, are we going to open schools? Are we going to open schools? And I'm like, well, we didn't even have this conversation about bars and restaurants. I mean, everybody was just like, yeah, let's get those things open. So it's not that I think that we should open schools. In fact, my own personal decision is that I don't want to send my kids back to school right now. I mean, you talked about your children. I mean, my children seem to be doing fairly well at home. I've got younger kids. That decision might be very different if I had a 15-year-old who was in high school. And I think it is a personal decision. And I certainly don't want to put teachers in a situation where they're forced to go back to school and put them in the middle of a pandemic and all these petri dishes like you're discussing. So I guess I don't have a good answer. I think that I think that there's probably states in this country right now where we could realistically open back schools, especially if we did primarily outdoor classrooms with social distancing, some degree of isolation of the students and masks, and do it in a safe way. But there's also states in this country where it absolutely makes no sense to open up schools right now because it's just going to get significantly worse. Florida, Mississippi, Arizona, probably California, and some of those states are opening and some of them aren't. What we don't have is we don't have a public discourse about what the best solution is.
Yeah, and when I make statements about it's bad for teachers and good for kids, that's not very helpful in the decision should we open or not. So I guess if I'm a policymaker and I really have to give some helpful advice, I think the biggest thing I would suggest is I think the mandates are crazy, whether it's a national mandate or even a statewide mandate. If schools have to do this, they have to open up by this point or they have to delay. It's so granular that, like I said, even in families, it's split as to what's best for the kids. I think the only way to really solve this problem in the best way is to let really smart people in local areas make the best decisions for them. Some school districts, maybe it is they open up for kids over a certain age, but kids younger not, or have an option for younger kids who have who can't be at home for whatever reason. But I think it's going to take creativity on a local level and not necessarily a mandate from a larger organization. And that's again, in my mind, it's got to be really granular to make a really good decision that's going to have the best, least risks and the highest reward. We're not going to eliminate risk for any side no matter what, but if we can just minimize those with creative, smart people locally, I think that's our best bet, honestly.
I agree with that. I think local decisions obviously make more sense. Just if you look at any other local decision regarding this virus and opening back up, it has to be made on a microclimate level because it's different from county to county, from state to state.
Yeah, for sure. And we have to, in 2 minutes, we're supposed to be recording a webinar, so we need to jump off of this. We're recording a webinar on the new tracks that we've created within Wild Health that we're really excited about. We did not send the webinar link out to our patients until a few hours ago, so we'll only have probably not many people at all join. So we will publish this within the next few days too if you're interested in the specific tracks that we've created on brain optimization, mindfulness, athletic performance, several other things as well. So look for that podcast. And what we're going to do, because we sent this link out very late to our patients, is we will have another webinar on the matter within a couple weeks for anyone, not just our patients, but we want to answer questions about these tracks. We're really excited. You've heard us talk over and over about how a holistic approach to people and optimizing the system is really important. We truly believe that, but we also have started to have so many patients who they seem pretty optimized from a holistic standpoint, and they really want to dig in and optimize their brain function or athletic performance or other things. So we've gotten really granular, have some specific tracks that our coaches and physicians have created. So look for that podcast in the next few days as well, and then we'll have another webinar just to answer questions that people have about the Wild Health optimization tracks. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you in a few days.